Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, welcome. I'm Lee Camp, joined by the always amazing Eleanor Goldfield. Can't even get a hello out of her. She's always entertaining, folks. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us with the show. Sometimes I like to tap. Sometimes I like to give people the
reverberations in the microphone,
yeah,
and
but
then all
that's
they hear
kind
is
of what that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm going for a it gets some energy going. It gets people excited. You know what I find annoying is when everyone's talking at once. Sorry, I just thought that would be a good tag to the sketch. Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to talk about whether we're seeing a coup of a coup, I don't, yeah, well, that'll be part of the discussion. Could this be defined as a coup? But much of the media, especially the more liberal media, is calling this a coup by Elon Musk. He is taking over and shredding the government, and he is ruining the perfect and upstanding democracy that the United States has had forever, and now no more. That's what Elon Musk is doing. So we're going to get into that. We're going to dig into the juicy details of that. And is this a coup? Because they're going to disband USAID. I already covered that the other day about USAID's main purpose is to create coups in other countries, and it seems that Trump and Elon Musk want to get rid of it because they're afraid it might be helping some people. But anyway.
Well, it does have aid in the name. It's very sneaky.
In the name, so it's kind of creepy to them. But everyone, click thumbs up. Do us that favor. Even if you're listening on a podcast, click the 5-star rating, click the bell icon, all that good stuff. You make this show possible. And let's get to it. So here's from The Economist.
Is that really a picture of the... Oh, no, it's... Okay. I thought they were using as a picture of, like, the founding fathers to make the point that this is what America is.
Okay, this is a revolution right now? Is that what you mean?
No, I just meant like these are how people talk, like these are the founding fathers, the ideals that this country was founded on, and we have to protect that. I thought that that's what they were trying to peddle, but it's just douche canoe standing in front of that. No,
it's douche canoe looking at the founding fathers happily.
Has he been, by the way, and not to say that his douche canoery is related to drug use, but has he been sober?
Wondering about the conjugation, that was douche canoery.
Has he been sober since the inauguration? Because he looked like I feel like he was gumming a lot, like this, like cokeheads do. I feel like that was happening a lot on Inauguration Day. Again, not saying that cocaine causes fascism. Just an interesting thing to note.
Why are you so anti-coke?
But I feel like he's just been, this is like one of those manic episodes where you get all of the cocaine and you do it all at once because you can't hide it anywhere, so you just decide to do it all.
We know he loves the Nazis, and they were, you can look it up.
That's true.
They were very coked out. They were all handed coke in order to invade France and basically keep fighting 5 days in a row without sleep. And
didn't Hitler's doctor say that his heart was going to explode or something if he kept taking as many uppers as he was taking?
Quite possibly. He did apparently go crazier and crazier, as is Elon Musk. But anyway, let's...
Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Yeah. It was just a side note.
That's tangenuary, if you're wondering about the conjugation. So The Economist is... the title is, Elon Musk is shredding America's government as he did Twitter. And they're kind of comparing
the government to Twitter.
They're comparing what he did to Twitter with what he's doing to the U.S. government. And he definitely is shredding some things. I don't want to understate what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing. But I think one of the biggest things to question here is this much different from what you were getting from the federal government to begin with? For example, shredding USAID. And by the way, they're going to keep the coup creation aspects of USAID continuing in the State Department with Marco Rubio heading it, so that they can keep destroying countries in countries around the globe. But they're just getting rid of other aspects of it, and they're doing it overnight. They're just, people are walking in and their offices are locked. So in many ways, this feels like a coup, but could it be a coup? Can it count as a coup if Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, has been allotted to do all this garbage by the elected president?
That's we're kind of dipping into semantics, which is where a lot of great debates happen. But
It's where a lot of great debates die too.
It's true. But as a philosophy nerd, I love the debate about what words mean, but that's not what we're here to do. It's just like if Elon Musk was given this power by the government that he is then picking apart, is it really a coup, or is he just doing what the government said that they were going to do anyway? It's like, it's not really a coup. It's just like an intensification of a dismantling that, let's be honest, has been happening, not to this extent, but has been happening for quite some time. So can you call it a coup?
So I guess you could. Yeah, you and I were talking about this for a few minutes earlier. I guess you could, if you're saying he's breaking the law, which if a president
break the law all the time.
They absolutely do. Which if a president gets into power and then says, okay, Congress votes don't count, or actually Trump did try to say, like, basically the budget that Congress passed doesn't matter. I get to decide what we're doing. So
I'm the decider.
I'm the decider. So this stuff, some of it is illegal, it seems. So I guess you could call that coup-esque, coup-ish. How do you conjugate that one? I'll go
Cooey.
It's
Cooey.
I'll go to the conjugator in chief over here for that one. Cooey. Okay. Thank you, Robin, for a good point. Robin in the chat says he paid more for Twitter. The government only cost him $288 million, which is about what he paid to get Trump elected. But there's so many aspects of this that, like, he's so far, they're largely gutting things that were the Band-Aids to try and make it look like the government was helping workers or people or average people. They're gutting the Office of Consumer Protection. They fired, or Trump has fired. This is not Elon Musk. Trump has fired 2 of the people on the National Labor Review Board, which means they don't have a quorum, which means they can't do anything. And if the NLRB can't do anything, that means that they can't approve new unions. And if you go to them because, various corporations have been doing harm to their workers, they can't actually do anything. So it's basically kneecapping the NLRB. But the thing is, each of these things was like the last vestiges of any concern for workers. You have, and like what percentage of workers are unionized anymore in this country? 7 to 10%. So most workers are not even represented by the NLRB. It's a tiny fraction of the American workforce. This is basically doing publicly, face forward, what the American government has been doing to us behind closed doors.
Right. Yes.
Am I crazy?
No. And I think, and again, it's not we're not trying to downplay the fact that this is happening. Like, oh, no big deal, folks. We're trying to contextualize it. And I think that's the important difference, is that a lot of people are acting like this is coming out of nowhere, as opposed to this happening on the backs of so many presidents and Democrats and Republicans alike who have, like Lee talks about the gravity of capitalism, who have chipped away at anything the workers won. I mean, even weekend, people like to say, well, you have a weekend. It's like most people don't, actually, because most people work at least 2 jobs. And the idea of having that free time that people fought for is a joke. We now have children working, right? So all of the things, even the most extreme things like child labor, that we still think of as not being a part of our lived experiences. Like, oh, we still have a weekend. We don't allow kids to work in factories. We do that. Yes, we do. So, and those things have happened under Democrats and Republicans alike. I'm not saying, the red dumpster fire is better than the blue or vice versa. I'm saying they're both dumpster fires. And it's important to contextualize these very serious moves in that history, right? Because again, if you don't know your history, you don't know your present, and you can't form your future. So I think it's really important to recognize that. And this is awful, and it will have a negative impact on lots and lots of people. And also, the protections that were in place were never enough. It's kind of like the dismantling of Roe v. Wade. It never went far enough to actually give people access to reproductive health care. Is it bad that it's gone? Absolutely.
And it should have been codified.
Right. And things like DACA. It's like, yes, but and also
not DACA. No, that was different.
That was different.
Yeah.
And I think that's done. That's done. Actually, I think they just moved it to Gaza. But anyway, so like these kind of quote unquote protections that are oftentimes things that Democrats will bring up in speeches about all the wonderful things that they've done. And my favorite example is Obama passed, when he was president, he passed a law that he said was an environmental, this is such a win for the environmental movement. And it was about coal slurry and how coal companies are no longer allowed to leave coal slurry to seep into the ecosystems. And coal slurry, for those of you who don't know, is the waste product of coal mining. And it's filled with these heavy metal cocktails, and it's absolutely disgusting. And it destroys ecosystems. What Obama neglected to mention is that, yeah, the coal companies do have to clean that up, but they have 3 years to do it. Guess what's already seeped into the groundwater after 3 years of sitting there? So it's like these kind of quote unquote protections and these progressive moves or whatever is when you actually look at it, when you look at the fine print, it's not. And so this dismantling is horrific. Yes, it's disgusting. And also contextualizing it will allow us to understand where we really are. And again, what we need to do to actually gain some basic rights, which is not just voting for Democrats. Thanks.
And some of you are mentioning rightly in the chat that Musk now has access to all kinds of government information that he shouldn't. And some loner weirdo, nice name, says the reason I distrust Musk with this information is because he's not trustworthy. Very true. So yeah, it's not. Neither of us are saying this shit isn't bad. We're saying that the stink of this shit has been around for decades, and it's just now very forthright. We've said many times about Trump's first 4 years that he really took the facade off of the U.S. empire. He does things more clearly than, and I don't mean he's doing it intentionally, it's just who he is, but he's done things more clearly in terms of the crimes of the U.S. empire, the breaking of international norms, international laws of the U.S. empire. So much of it is no longer a secret because Donald Trump is too narcissistic and too dumb to cover it up. And Elon Musk, having massive control inside the U.S. government, a man that has received 0 votes for anything, it actually shows how the U.S. government has actually worked for a long time, which is the ruling elite, the billionaires and nearly trillionaires like Elon Musk are running the show, and Trump has filled his cabinet with billionaires. I mean, a hedge fund manager is now the head of what they put him in charge of, the Consumer Protection Financial Protection Board. He put in a hedge fund billionaire in there. And now they're working on the latest articles are saying they're working on gutting the Department of Education. And this is what's been underway, I think, in a lot of ways for a while now. And it's just it's speeding up, and it's very forthright with goons and parasites like Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And I went on a rant yesterday about how this has nothing to do with government efficiency. If Musk wanted to get money for government efficiency, he could have gotten that 100 times over from the military. So, yeah. And
what he said.
The military money is all sitting there. And by the way, even the Guardian, which is often not very good on, it's basically a neoliberal outlet in most ways, but every once in a while they have one that speaks some truth. And they have an article here: Trump 2.0 is exposing American exceptionalism for what it is and has always been.
Thank you.
And she says, she talks about the flurry of executive orders, the horror show that's going on. She says, but look closer and you will see not a rogue president taking a hammer to a hitherto stable political order, but a history of the erosion of norms that paved the way for him.
I like that's a crunchy sentence.
Joe Biden's pardoning of his own family members was as much an injury to norms as Trump's pardoning of those convicted of January 7th. January 6th.
Whatever.
January 6th. Trump's very purpose is to knock down norms, but in some ways he is only accelerating a process that had already started. Take Trump's order to construct a migrant detention center in Guantanamo Bay, a space that for years has operated outside of international law, despite outcries and appeals for closure. Hundreds of prisoners were kept there under military law, often following rendition, disappearance, and torture. Trump's proposal to detain tens of thousands of migrants there is an outrageous move, but it's not an aberration.
Thank you.
He is building literally on what came before him.
You could have just said,
read this instead.
Whoever this is doing a good job of putting things.
Vince Warren says, like many of Trump's authoritarian attacks on human rights, this one has shameful precedents in U.S. history. Another of Trump's directives also builds on precedent. One of his executive orders pledges to deport students and others without U.S. citizenship who participate in pro-Palestine protests. But their actions were already condemned and over-policed way before Trump was reelected. And not to mention that the U.S. has a history of deporting those who go against what the U.S.
Palmer raids. Cough, cough.
Yeah, Palmer raids, Emma Goldman. The same goes for Trump's withdrawal from international organizations such as the World Health Organization and his imperial adventurism when it comes to foreign policy. The U.S. has a long record under much more gentlemanly precedents of breaking international law, insulting international institutions, embarking on unilateral campaigns licensed by its superpower status. Over 2 decades ago, Congress passed a law authorizing all means necessary to free U.S. or allied personnel detained at the ICC. It was dubbed the Hague Invasion Act, which we've talked about many times. Even optically, Trump's alliances with tech billionaires is crude and visible, but it mirrors the billionaires and influencers who flocked to Kamala Harris's campaign.
Thank you. It's a revealing of the system, not a changing.
Yeah. The danger, and here's the last part, the danger comes from assuming that Trumpism comes out of nowhere. In fact, it comes from many sources, but one of them is his predecessor's creation of a political system in which serial breaches are seen as acceptable because they're done by the right people. While to millions of people, Trump is the right person.
Right, and this speaks to the splintering of the country, which is another conversation. But this really is like, it also speaks to that binary that we're raised in, right? Republican and Democrat. And I think it's important to recognize that we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can hate Trump and hate Biden at the same time. Like, we can recognize that oppression comes from the system itself, not just from one dude in the White House. I think that that's really important because, again, if you don't actually know what the problem is, then how can you address it? It's like an alcoholic saying, oh, I'm not alcoholic, I stubbed my toe. It's like, no, that's not, you putting a Band-Aid on your toe is not going to fix your liver problems. Like, you have to look at the issues and where they're coming from. Otherwise, you can't unfuck anything.
Well said. And yes, it is absolutely hard to understand why anyone who's lefty is pro-Trump. They're not actual left-wingers.
There's a problem here, and this could go into a conversation about psychology and the loss of like pride and things like that. But I think a lot of people felt that Trump represented something different, and that the long march of Democrats who have snubbed their noses at the poor working class, at the same time expecting the poor working class, particularly non-whites, to always side with them, has left such a bad taste in so many people's mouths that they felt, well, Trump might not be better, but he's different. And to quote Voltaire, I don't know that it will be better, but it will be different. And so I think a lot of people were hoping for that. Now, the thing is, it's not even different. It's just worse. But like, I think a lot of people were hoping for that. And I'm not excusing it. I'm just explaining it from what I've been able to glean talking to folks and reading and things like that. And I think that this is the unfortunate problem with a lot of the lack of critical media literacy, the lack of any viable options outside the two-party system. There's a lot of issues, but I think that this is something that we're seeing a lot of in terms of people who either voted for Trump or the majority of people who didn't vote at all that day. If you look at who really won the presidential election, it was nobody.
Yeah. So one of the other things that Trump and Musk are doing is going after NPR and PBS. I think they might be trying to accuse them of breaking federal law in terms of how they use promotions or whatever, because they're technically not allowed to do advertising when they get federal funding or something like that. So instead, they do the little, we're sponsored by, and they do kind of half ads or whatever, half-assed ads. Anyway. So he's going after them, and that may be the cause of the recent pro-Trump coverage from NPR.
This is really, it's like, get your tongue out of his ass. This is, okay, so fairness and accuracy reporting does great work. So I love, and Lee also loves their headlines. They said February 1st, they wrote, with zero evidence, NPR suggests that Trump may work for the working class in second term. Qua.
He might work for the working class. Here he is holding a thing of fries. That proves he works for the working class.
So this is the this aired on NPR, and it was done by senior editor and correspondent Ron Elving. And Elving says that, for instance, as you see in the picture here, that Trump made a show of working a shift at McDonald's last fall. And
I'm sure he was their best worker.
Yeah, right. And he used his fame and Twitter account to popularize a fringe theory about then President Obama being foreign born and thus ineligible to be president, which connected him to a hardcore of voters, such as those who told pollsters they believed Obama was a Muslim. And Elving suggests that this is the sort of thing that populists do. But when it comes to offering examples of actual populist policies, Elving admits that there aren't many to speak of. In fact, he says
those aren't important policies.
In fact, he says Trump in his first term pursued a relatively familiar list of Republican priorities that greatly benefited high-income earners and holders of wealth. So why wouldn't that be a main predictor of what Trump is likely to do going forward, is what Fairness and Accuracy Reporting is wondering. But Elving suggests, on the basis of nothing, that this could be different. Quote, as Trump's second term unfolds, the issues most likely to be vigorously pursued may be those where the interests of his populist base can be braided with those who sat in Billionaires Row on Inauguration Day. Okay, I love your use of the word braiding, but what? What? Okay, where are the policies that match with the billionaires and the populists? Also, there is an extreme misunderstanding of the word populist here. Populist does not just mean far right wing, okay? And I think this is also the problem. NPR has suggested here that populist just means like this extreme fascistic neo-Nazi right wing. And that's not true. Populist at the core means popular. So the idea that
popular policies. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of these populist policies that people want to hear, and I know this was 100 years ago, so no one's going to remember this, but Bernie Sanders did a town hall on Fox News, and they lost their damn minds at Fox News because when he talked about universal health care, guess what? The place exploded with applause.
Loved him. He was
exploded
like Hulk
with
Hogan
applause.
circa 1984.
I don't know what that means. So this idea, that is a populist, universal health care is a populist policy. It's just that it's never put out that way because we have come to understand populism equals far right. But that's BS, because if that were the case and we have a far right government, wouldn't we have a populist government? But we don't. So that's another problem, going back to semantics, but it's also just like, it feels so typical of how the media the corporate media works. And, everybody from the Washington Post, the New York Times to NPR has been getting down on their knees to welcome Trump. But
and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos front row at his inauguration, paying hundreds of millions to pay for his inauguration.
Right. But that's the point that Elving is trying to make, that somehow that these billionaires would be on the same page as a bunch of like poor white folks and would somehow appreciate the policies that would help them. What? So this is once again one of those moments where critical media literacy and looking at the propaganda and going, what makes you think that he would be good? And what makes you think, based on anything that you've seen, that he would be good for people, for any people? And so right-wing poor whites or otherwise. It's
the only justification for this is either NPR has their head up their ass, or NPR realized that Trump was coming after them and was like, let's start doing some good Trump reporting, even if it has zero basis in reality. Let's become Fox News.
So, yeah, it's really... And this is, of course, Trump has said that he's going to go after the media, and the media is the problem. So instead of the media fighting back and saying, bring it, they are complying in advance, which, if you look at history, anytime fascism or any right-wing kind of government has taken hold, you don't want to be the people who comply in advance.
So some quick notes before we get to the next topic. One is everyone should check out Eleanor on Project Censored. Amazing podcast. Also, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that this week, there's a really great interview. Speaking of journalists and not complying in advance, a really great interview with the Mohawk journalist Isaac White about his arrest and, the dual crime of being a journalist and being Indigenous. And we get into talking about the importance of local media. So that's a really great interview. That's wherever you listen to podcasts. It's also up at projectcensored.org.
And also, this is a podcast. It's called Common Censored. My shows are podcasts when I do them alone. My live streams alone are also a podcast called The Lee Camp Show or Moment of Clarity, depends on which platform you're on. So look those up if you're looking for podcasts. And my new podcast, Just Comedy, it's got all my comedy stuff on there. So it's like listening to a comedy album. If you want to throw on a comedy album, check out Just Comedy. And then what are the other things I was going to list? I hopefully the new show Unredacted Tonight will start soon.
I know you're always waiting for me to
I've now learned to pause for it rather than try and tell people like a
I'm sorry that my joy at your new project is so frustrating.
I love it. So yes, it should be starting soon. If you want to find out when and everything, if you want to get that first episode into your email box and all that stuff, sign up for my email list at leecamp.com. That's my website, leecamp.com, and you should get a pop-up that asks you to join the free email list, and that's how to do it. Okay, we're going to keep going. In about 15 minutes, we're going to kind of say goodbye, but I'm going to do something I haven't done on the live stream. Well, I'm explaining what that means.
I know.
Do something I haven't done on the live stream, which is play my 20-minute kind of DIY doc from Tibet that I made. So I will put that on the live stream, which I haven't done before, never done that. So having the Tibet doc, I think you're really gonna love it, and we'll do it in about 15 minutes. But anyway, let's get to the next story before we get to that. This is a little sad, but I feel like well, definitely sad, but I feel like relatively obvious story coming out of Gaza. Sorry.
I mean, are any of the stories from there not obvious?
No, it doesn't mean we shouldn't cover it. This is the stuff that has to be covered.
Well, and I wanted to bring this up because I feel like a lot of people are understandably so relieved at the very, very fragile ceasefire that we're still in at the moment. And just in case this ends in the next like 20 minutes, it is currently Tuesday, February 4th at 3:30 p.m. So don't get mad at me for getting that wrong if you listen to this in like 2 hours. So the situation on the ground in Gaza is still incredibly severe. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's a doctor in central Gaza, and he said that as per the agreement, medical supplies don't come in until 22 days after the ceasefire. So they haven't come in yet. And of course, this is a big problem because there are so many people who have been wounded and are suffering, even if they haven't been wounded by the bombing. There's, I mean, just the issue of living in these conditions for so long.
Yeah.
These are health risks.
Well, and Israel blew up almost all the hospitals intentionally because they wanted disease and illness to kill thousands.
Right. So the extreme shortages of equipment are ongoing. Having to operate without any kind of anesthesia and things like that, that's ongoing. But so as Mondo Weiss reports here, this is spread to the numerous diseases due to devastated infrastructure, environmental pollution, lack of basic health services, overcrowded refugee camps and displacement shelters, and shortages of water and electricity. In fact, this is one of the things that Amnesty International pointed out, is that part of the genocide, which they called genocide, was the lack of water, people literally dying of thirst. So among the issues, one of the most prevalent diseases in Gaza is hepatitis A, which is caused by drinking contaminated water. Israel destroyed Gaza's water and sewage networks, and people have had no choice but to rely on polluted water sources for survival, which is leading, of course, to a widespread outbreak of the virus. Thousands of Palestinians have taken refuge in crowded schools, hospitals, or tent encampments, with only one bathroom on average for some 700 people, causing the disease to spread like wildfire. And basically, they're giving information about what hepatitis A looks like, and that this is, of course, people are at risk of passing this on to children, and that people can die from this. And especially when people are experiencing extreme physical stress due to the other situations that they're living with. Of course, food poisoning. This is something that's common because the food that does get through is oftentimes expired, and Israel's well aware of this. It's part of their sadism, is to send in food that is either past or very close to its expiration date. Scabies is another problem. And yeah, just like everything from skin issues to internal issues. A 14-year-old boy contracted scabies, and there's no treatment. And something like that, where like you and I, if we get scabies, we can go to the doctor and they give us some ointment or whatever the hell they give you for scabies. I don't know. God, I hope I never get it. But it's easy to deal with because we have 21st century medical care. I mean, I understand the US, not everyone does, because America. But there is no access to simple things like that. My friend in central Gaza said that he would give people an Advil when he was going to perform an amputation. It's like, that's not, I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's what do you have? You have nothing. So
and I just want to remind people that people should know that this didn't start on October 7th, which is part of the reason October 7th happened. Israel has long tried to make it so that Gaza does not have the appropriate medical supplies, cannot adequately save people that should be easy to save. In order to get out of Gaza and go to a hospital that can more effectively treat things like breast cancer, you had to get permission from Israel because it is a prison. And Israel would give that permission to a tiny percentage of those who requested it. So even though breast cancer is something like it only kills like 10% of those who get it, or somewhere around there, in Gaza it's like 80%. That's pre-October 7th. Mm-hmm. So I just want people to realize that this type of savagery started before October 7th, and it's just been amped up by 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a theme for today, let it be the continuation of these issues. So nothing started on October 7th, and Trump didn't start this horrific project called the United States. But this could be a nice segue if we're going to cover this story. But the other issue is the air quality. I mean, imagine what the air quality is like when you're breathing in, hundreds, if not thousands, of the fallout of 2,000-pound bombs. I mean, it over and over again every single day for more than a year, in places that have had already environmental issues and no access to clean water and things like that. People are dealing with extreme respiratory issues and infections and diseases that are, of course, exacerbated and then fatal because of the situations there. So, you know me, I'm not the person to bring a good news story, but I think it's important that we recognize that these issues, even if the ceasefire holds, which of course we all want it to, there are issues that are generational that we will keep seeing for decades and decades to come, much like we see in the wake of every U.S. endeavor, whether that be Vietnam or Iraq or indeed Palestine. And it's important to not forget that and to remember that we have a role to play in dismantling these systems. Also, just want to remind folks that I do have a fundraiser going on my via Instagram at Radical Eleanor for doctors in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to check that out, just go to my Instagram page at Radical Eleanor, and there's information there.
I'm going to type that into the comments.
Thank you.
That's Radical Eleanor on Instagram. My favorite platform. Okay. I actually, since we only have a few more minutes before. Hey, thanks, James. Awesome. James supporting the show and excited for Unredacted tonight. So am I. I'm hoping that it can live up to all of my expectations as well, not just others. But thank you so much, James. That's awesome. Since we only have a few minutes before I play the Tibet doc, I might just go to this one. That's a quick story, if that's okay. This is a quick good news story.
Ooh, look at you with the good news story.
At least in the, nothing, if you dig deep, is a good. It's like it's people responding to bad news by doing something good, which is this is showing how many people showed up. 1,000 people packed a house in an organizing space in Denver, Aurora.
Which I think Aurora has a huge detention center in it.
Yeah, 1,000 people packed a house to get organized and build the movement to defend immigrants. And this is like a 10-second video here, but.
That's great.
But anyway, so cool to see that many people coming out to get organized, because that is what it takes to defend immigrants, but to defend everyone who's going to be under attack during this presidency, during the last presidency. It's just an amping up of the brutal abuse perpetrated by the American empire. And it's great to see people organizing, getting together. That's what it's going to take.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Okay, folks, we are going to head out, but that's not the end of the show, because I am going to show my little 20-minute DIY Tibet doc in case you haven't seen it, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Operation Crush Ice. I like that.
Nice. Thank you. Everything glitchy now. I can't highlight comments. The Wi-Fi glitchy. We're on track. I blame Elon Musk. Oh, there it was.
Oh, there it was.
For a second. But yes, I will. So I will start the doc here. I hope you enjoy it if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, I hope you don't enjoy it. And we will see you. Well, let's see. So there's no government secrets tomorrow. I'll be back for a live stream Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I hope you'll just show up, because you're not going to get the alerts. Richard Wolff will be joining me. Professor Richard Wolff, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Copycat. He was just on my show.
Yeah, but he was on my show first, like years ago. Anyway, everyone, give Eleanor Goldfield a round of applause. I can't hear you.
Okay, wow, we're just gonna need to stop right now.
All right.
Can't yes and this kind of behavior.
Enjoy the Tibet doc. See you guys Thursday. So this happened. I'm actually in Tibet. But right now I'm dressed as, let's see if I can do this, some sort of drunken Chewbacca or a bush that has seen better days. Really let itself go. So here I am in Tibet, aka Xizang, the Tibet Autonomous Region. There's a lot of tourism here, but very little of it from Americans. And so I thought I'd walk you through some of what I've seen. I've been here about 2 weeks. This is towards the end of my my time here. As you can see, the mountains are amazing. The slogan for Tibet is the rooftop of the world. The first thing you'll notice when you get here is that there's not tons of oxygen. Ranges in the capital city of Lhasa, it's a little over 13,000 feet, I think. Driving just a couple of hours, we got up to 15,000 feet above sea level. So the moment you get out of the plane, you will find yourself kind of gasping for air, and it takes a little while to get used to. Some people get blistering headaches and can't, think and can't do anything and basically just lay down, but they also can't sleep. So it sounds really miserable. Altitude sickness. I didn't have that. I'd like to thank Wim Hof's breathing techniques for helping me not have an issue with that. But even when you're doing pretty well, you still don't have tons of oxygen. You, like, the entire time I've been here, I've walked about this pace. You don't want to do any running. You have about 40% less oxygen, I think, in every breath. I played 15 minutes of 5-on-5 full court basketball with a bunch of Buddhist monks. It was me and 9 Buddhist monks. They were strikingly good. I scored a few buckets. Okay, I'm not going to deny it, but during that time, my lungs were on fire. And that was 10 to 15 minutes. It was nothing. As you can tell, this area I'm in right now, massive infrastructure. This appears to be the rollerblading area, which I didn't realize. The infrastructure is truly incredible, and most of it has been built over the past, 20 years, maybe 30 at most. Hopefully some of you know that China has taken 850 million people out of extreme poverty over the past 30 years. Like 75% of all people that have gotten out of extreme poverty around the world, it's all been in China. But one of the things they do is they build up the infrastructure of the areas that were very poor. And one of those was a lot of the areas of Tibet, Xizang. The building up by the Chinese government has been immense. It's gone from 10,000 kilometers of paved highway 50 years ago to 100,000 kilometers of paved highway. I've been through, I can't even count how many massive tunnels built through mountains, and the bridges and the dams and whatever else. Huge infrastructure. And what strikes me as an American is I don't know that we build large infrastructure anymore, do we? I feel like we just patch up a collapsing system. Granted, I don't have my hand on the pulse of every city in America, but the last big infrastructure project I can remember in a city that spanned like 10 or more years was the Big Dig in Boston. But it doesn't happen often. It's pretty rare, because it seems to me that everything in the United States, all building that's done in construction, is to patch up what exists or to build something that will be profitable within, 3 years or 2 years or next quarter or something. It's always about, well, where's the profit? China doesn't really, as far as I can tell, operate in that way. It's more, what can we build that will facilitate the society, that will facilitate people's movement and people's lives. It's not saying it's all perfect, but I'm just saying, like, they're willing to put a lot of effort and a lot of time, although they do it a lot quicker than we do, and a lot of money into massive construction that will benefit people in the long term. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be profitable or not. You can hear me getting yelled at because I am quite the oddity. Hey, how you doing? What's up? Nice to meet you. People will just gawk at me, especially children. which I think goes for anything that's unusual. It's like adults are like, I'm not going to stare, I'm not going to stare. Whereas children are like, I'm totally going to stare. What the is that? Jesus Christ. Who let him out? No, they're all incredibly friendly, though. Of course, there are other areas that are more crowded. Here's a mall. A lot of people walking around getting food. And some of the other propaganda you'll hear about Tibet is that there's no religious freedom. Well, something we're told. However, there are tens of thousands of Buddhist monks. There's hundreds or maybe thousands of temples. There's over 1,000 or maybe it's a few thousand Buddhist nuns, one of which I got to be good friends with. There is pretty much Buddhism everywhere. Like, you see a lot of it. And the Buddhist monks I talked to and the nuns I talked to, they said that they have religious freedom. So it's just propaganda that's used to try and undermine China, try and undermine Xizang, and that seems to be the goal. And they know that because there aren't tons of American or Western tourists here, they can often get away with that propaganda without many people revealing the truth. And so they often do. I mean, the people here have just been, like, so lovely. They're just so nice. I mean, it's the same thing I encountered in Cuba. Just everyone seems very kind. And I also, like I said, I lived in New York for a long time, New York City. There's so many people there that no one gives a shit about anyone. Even at stores, like stores, you have that fake kind of friendliness where it's like, I want to sell you something. Hey, you're my best buddy because I want you to give me money. In New York, they don't even have that. No soup for you. Maybe I'm being overly judgmental of the United States, but God, look at that. Look at that view. This looks like one of these CGI things. This is like, you know, some Avatar. Just a second ago, it was 3 18 to 20-year-old guys. As I'm walking by, they go, hello, hello. And I immediately went into my carefully crafted fear of 18 or 20-year-old men. Not because they're going to hurt me, but because they're going to hurt my feelings, okay? Because in the United States, if 18 to 20-year-old men say, hey, 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 and they go like that, they either want to fight you, want to make fun of you. You know, I lived in New York City for 12 years. This is basically always the truth. Or maybe they want you to buy them beer. But generally, most of the time, it's not good. Hey, 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 hey. Not generally not good. So these guys go, hello, hello. And I go, hey. The guy goes, you are very handsome. And I was like, thanks. And that was all he wanted. This is not one of those things where they're like, now can I sell you something? No, literally, that was the only reason he wanted to stop me, which the United States, that's not the case. That's not a thing. Hey, you. I just wanted to tell you, you're very attractive. All right, see you later. But anyway, something I haven't talked about is the claims of cultural genocide, right? The crushing of a culture. The cultural ideas, there are definitely different levels of culture with Tibetans. Like, I think there are some that very much stick to the traditional culture and some that have very much modernized. But it's everything I've seen, that doesn't seem to be China's fault. It doesn't seem the government's fault. It seems to be that things are modernizing and some people are choosing to keep very traditional ways and some people are choosing to keep moderate ways. But it's up to them how much they want to remain in the old ways. And I see a lot of the Tibetan culture here, but things are modernizing, which I don't know that you can fault anyone for modernizing. The entire United States, which used to be very different, like you go state to state, it used to be very different. Now, it's the same 10 stores. Like, there's have much real individual life to them. It was cities I've been to where it doesn't like, it really is a different feel from the rest of the United States. Most of the United States have been quite homogenized. Now, is that due to an effort by the United States to homogenize all the culture? No, it's due to modernization. It's due to the fact we're becoming a global world. That sounds like a Yogi Bearism. We're becoming a global world, but that being said, I think there's a lot about Tibetan culture that is still very much thriving and is really cool. What else can I tell you? There's plenty of complaints to be had about China, fine. I'm not here to go through all of them, but One of the bigger ones is government surveillance. Is there government surveillance in China? Absolutely. And guess what? There's government surveillance in the United States. We're just a lot better at making people think there's not, and making people think that it's okay, and that you aren't being surveilled, you aren't being watched, you aren't being judged. In the United States, they have somehow convinced most of the population that we are free, which is laughable. Of course, there's also a racial aspect of this. Ask your average black person in America how they feel when they get stopped randomly by police. Many of them will say, well, you don't know whether you're going to be shot and killed. I mean, if you want to learn more about this, white folks, read a Ta-Nehisi Coates book. And it's not just racial, obviously. There's a big class dynamic as well. If you are poor, you are far more likely to encounter our police in the United States. But the other thing is, in China, I don't think the police, like, killing someone that they stop is a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if the number of people killed by Chinese police, like on the street, is like under 100 a year. Whereas in the US, we're obviously in the thousands, and we have 1/4 of the number of people that China does. It averages 1,200 a year, but that's actually half of it, because as the Lancet Medical Journal said, 55% of all police murders are not written down as police murders. They're written down as asphyxiation, or had a heart attack, or it turned out was allergic to tasers or whatever. It's hi. How are you? I came to see Lhasa. Do you like Lhasa?
Yes.
Yes. Is it a beautiful place?
Yeah.
Your English is very good. Where'd you learn English to talk? School?
No.
Parents? Mom and pop?
Yes.
Mom and dad? Yeah. What's your name?
My name's Gama Tunku.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Look, and there's a bread smile. It pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Bread and smile. So this is obviously the kind of one of the commerce areas. I do think that Shizong has a lot of nerve to have me fly like 24 hours on various planes, and then I get here and, you know, it's like modern. It's got like electric cars everywhere. I want to see feudal lords being driven around on the backs of their serfs. I feel like that's not too much to ask. If I'm going to fly 24 hours, that's something else you got to learn about being at this altitude, is when you walk into the sun, like out of the shade, it is 900 degrees. And the moment you step into the shade, it is 12 degrees. A lot of Tibetans will just leave their jackets on, even when it's like 90 degrees, even when they're walking to the sun, because I think it's impossible to keep putting on and taking off your jacket every 12 seconds. Like you walk behind the shade of a tree, take the jacket off, put the jacket on, walk out, put it back on, take it off. You just start losing your mind. So they seem to just leave heavy sweaters and coats on, even as they're sitting in the sun baking. That's a bull, I believe, even though yaks are the main thing here. Yaks are big here. They love a yak. These are all yak horns. That's amazing. The yak is a very important thing out here. It doesn't just give them meat, but it also gives them firewood, because they use the dung for firewood. And apparently it does not smell, because when they have been grazing on clean grasses rather than whatever we feed our cows, it doesn't stink. And as you can see, there's no trees out here, so pre-electricity, what would you do for firewood? Well, you do that, making life work. Take a look at this. How close can one get to a yak before they get very unhappy with you? I'm not actually sure. They don't seem to want to hang out with me really, though. And they're a little more accustomed to the altitude, I think, than I am. So it's really not a fair race, I don't think. I just can't get enough of this landscape. It's just insane. The other thing that I've found with the people I've talked to is that they don't seem to hate Americans. They seem excited to see someone who speaks English or looks different. Which is funny because in the United States, we have so much xenophobia that there's a certain percentage of Americans that just hate Chinese people. They just think, oh, anyone in China, from China, must be, I don't know, a horrific human being or out to get them or spying on them or what. But I don't get the same impression here about Americans. Now, I don't know what the hell is coming up here, but it is colorful. Do you think this is for adults? Could I get on this? Would I be looked at any funnier than I already am if I got on these rides? Because pretty tempted. Pretty tempted. Some of these are amazing. Everywhere you look, you get a shot, you get a view between the mountains, and it's just, a view between the buildings, and it's just epic mountains. And of course, everything is a parenthetical of mountains on each side. We're out here looking for animals for one of the episodes I'm filming. But right now I'm dressed as, let's see if I can do this, some sort of drunken Chewbacca, or I don't know, a bush that has seen better days, really let itself go, in order to hide and make sure the animals don't see us while we try and photograph them. If I were an animal, I think I would probably flee if I saw a troubled Chewbacca walking towards me, but you know, whatever. To each his own. It's pretty unbelievable. And it's sad that America wants everyone to hate all of these people. Now, with the building of this large infrastructure, you can have a lot of seemingly empty places. You know, they're not packed. I mean, this gorgeous lake is amazing. Doesn't mean they're never packed. And I think people point to that and they go, oh, look, China made these empty cities and they're meaningless and they're useless. I think what the conclusion I've come to after being here for 2 weeks and other research is that China built these things because they were taking 850 million people out of extreme poverty, and those people are generally going to want to go to cities with more of the modern infrastructure that you and I probably are used to. I mean, I don't know where you're watching this, but many of them are not going to want to stay in extreme poverty when they have another option. And so you've got to have the cities, you've got to have the areas to let them move to. And huge YouTube show called, I think it's Yes Theory or something. And they went to that empty, you know, the propaganda around it was China built a city shaped like Paris with an Eiffel Tower, and it's empty and no one wants to be there, and they have this giant empty city. Yes Theory goes there and says, yeah, there are times it's empty. They go, but then the night comes and everybody comes out and they're playing in the streets and they're having a great time. And by the end of the video, they're like, I think I want to move here. This is amazing. So it is a lot of U.S. propaganda about like, oh, it's China's just building empty cities or whatever. I don't think that's it at all. I think they're building the infrastructure for having hundreds of millions of people no longer living in mud huts. And that can be an exaggeration sometimes, but some of the time it's literally mud huts. I did go see some of the extreme poverty because obviously some choose to stay in the area they're used to. I happen to be in Tibet. I know that it varies around China, but I happen to be in Shizong, and we went to see the old village where some Tibetan villagers lived, and some chose to stay there. And it's a level of poverty I had never witnessed before. This does not mean that the people who choose to stay there are necessarily miserable, but they live very different lives. The life expectancy before the modernization for your average Tibetan was 35 years old. And now the was 400,000, which just sounds crazy. And now it's, I can't even remember, was it 5 per thousand? It's basically the same as many U.S. states. But anyway, we went to the old village where many people had chosen to move to the modern village that was created by China in order to allow people to advance and not be living in extreme poverty. And we also went to the old village where some chose to stay. You can see by the structures that there's probably very little heating it just looks like a very difficult life. And you can see why the life expectancy was 35. I'm sure it's up a little from that now, but if you're living in those old towns with no medicine, very, very specific food items, not a very varied diet. Great use of words there, Lee. I've been around people speaking nothing but Chinese, and I don't speak Chinese, so I have not had a lot of time to use English recently. So maybe that's why I can't find my words. You can already hear me losing, just speaking, walking and speaking. I'm losing the oxygen to keep doing this. I mean, as you can just look at that view. The view's insane. Just goddamn gorgeous here.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha.